Morning, brethren and friends. The topic that I'll be sharing today is entitled How to Choose the Right Investment Advice. The text is taken from Matthew 6:19 to 24, which Brother Greg has just read to us. There's a story told about this very rich and famous man by the name of Paul Getty. He's an oil tycoon that lives in United States. He's not only rich and famous, but he's also a well-known miser. All right. He was obsessed with wealth accumulation, and he held onto his pocket very tightly. And these are the three things that's said about him. Firstly, according to his secretary, he washed his laundry with his hands so that he can save on the laundry fee. The second example of his being a miser is that once he invited a group of friends to a London dog show. He got his friends to walk a couple of blocks so that when the clock strikes 5, he will enjoy the discounted entry tickets. And in the third example is that in his large mansion, he installed a pay phone so that he doesn't have to pay for the phone charges of his guests. Mr. Paul Getty, when he died, he left everything behind in 1976 to a tune of 6 billion USD. In today's value is 25 billion. This story is a powerful reminder that wealth, no matter how vast, is temporary, and it cannot provide the ultimate security for our soul. It is the same with us today. When we die, we cannot take it with us. The money that we have in our bank, the money that we have in the super. So if Mr. Getty is alive today, would you take an investment advice from him? We all know what investment is. It is an asset acquired for the purpose of building wealth. It simply means that we use money to buy an asset to build wealth, to earn a profit for capital gain. But we are not talking about the money that we have set aside for our necessities, but rather the extra money that we have to invest. That said, is investing biblical? By that I mean, is it taught in the Bible? Besides the text that we have read by Brother Greg, I like to think that the parables of the talent in Matthew 25 also points us in that direction. In that parable, in chapter 25, verse 16, it says, "Then he who had received the 5 talents went and traded with them and made another 5 talents." The New King James Version of this text used the word traded with the talents, and in the New American it says business. He did business with them, with the talents. So the word trade includes business or any other honest work by which a profit is obtained. So in the ancient world, in that parable, a talent is actually a unit of weight, about 28 kilograms. But if it is used as a unit of currency, it is equal to 6,000 denarii. 1 denarius is enough to pay for a day's labor. So 1 talent is enough to pay for 20 years of labor. So that is a lot of money. 1 talent is a lot of money. So the storyline about this parable is about 3 servants. Each were given lots of money according to their ability. One was given 1 talent, the second was given 2 talents, and the third servant was given 5 talents. Each of them were to put the money given to them into productive use to make a profit. and be accountable for them. So the main theme of the parable is about stewardship. Stewardship of time, stewardship of money, stewardship of the resources that God has bestowed upon us. But for today's lesson, I'm going to share only on the stewardship of money. And hence today's title, How to Choose the Right Investment Advice. And to do that, we have to ace this decision. And ace is also the mnemonic for the 3 points which I'm going to cover today. A is to assess. To assess the credentials of the advisor. C is to consider. Consider the advice given critically. And E is to examine our hearts or ourselves truthfully in relations to the advice. So, if you do not want to take an investment advice from Paul Getty, would you consider to take an advice from Warren Buffett? Let's assess the credentials of this advisor. Warren's credential was built upon a solid foundations of education and entrepreneurship. He got his Bachelor of Arts from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln and earned his master degree in economics from the Ivy League Columbia University. He studied under a renowned economist by the name of Benjamin Graham, who also an author of one of the best-selling books called The Intelligent Investor. Warren's leadership in Berkshire Hathaway and his influential writing has made him known to be one of the greatest investors of all time. His net worth in 2024 stands at $134 billion. Would you take an investment advice from him? Before you say yes, let's consider the credentials of yet another advisor. Jesus Christ. Jesus is God in human form, born of a virgin birth in the city of Bethlehem, and was brought up in the small town of Nazareth in the region of Galilee. While he was young, he received Jewish education just like any Jewish boy. Jesus left the majesty of heaven to be with his creation, and he willingly laid out his life to die for the sin of his people. In history, Jesus is the founder of Christianity, which has grown to be the largest in the world. The census conducted in 2024 is about 2.3 billion followers. He is also known as the Lamb of God, Son of David, Son of God, Son of Man, King of Kings. During his ministry on earth, Jesus performed many miracles and he taught. Among many lessons that he has taught, one that stands out on the Sermon on the Mount, recorded in Matthew chapter 5 to 7, he taught on topics on humility, compassion, anger, divorce, and also on the use of money. When Jesus died, he left no money behind. 3 days later, he rose again and now sitting on the right-hand side of God. His true wealth or worth, true worth in 2024 and even now is immeasurable. Why? Because he owns everything in this universe and in this world. Because he's the creator of this universe. So who now do you think is more qualified to give you an investment advice? The second thing we need to do in choosing the right investment advice is to consider the advice critically. Warren Buffett investment advice anchor on 4 investment principles. Firstly, value investing. He focused on undervalued companies with high potential for growth. Secondly, he focused on long-term investment horizon. He emphasized on patience and the power of compounding returns. And thirdly, he focused on quality business with strong management, core competence, and consistent income growth. Thirdly, he focused on quality business. Fourthly, he focused on not taking any risks because he does not believe in losing money. Therefore, he only focused on business that he's familiar with. Jesus' investment advice is primarily found in verse 19 and 20. If you ask an investment advice or strategist to read verse 19 and 20, he probably may coin Jesus' investment advice as risk-adjusted value investing. To understand what risk-adjusted value investing is, let us understand the word treasure, which we find in verse 19 and verse 20. Treasure is a noun. In today's context, simply means wealth. So what were the wealth in Jesus' time? Many people in Jesus' time store their wealth in Tyrian purple, a luxurious and expensive fabric, also known as imperial purple. And many people also store their treasures or their wealth in precious metal like gold and silver. Have you ever wondered why people store their wealth in the first place? Besides reasons of greed and materialism, many people store their wealth for stability and security for themselves. The Tyrian purple, they are not only a store of wealth, but also a symbol of wealth. So only the wealthiest, the nobles, and the senators can afford to wear garments made in Tyrian purple, called toga praetexta. And only the emperor can wear a garment in complete Tyrian purple. So, to understand risk-adjusted value investing, it is as if the investment strategists have argued that Jesus has combined the 4 principles of Warren Buffett, combined the 4 and formed into one concept known as risk-adjusted value investing. But first, Jesus wants us to understand that money is temporary and it is not worth for us risking our soul over it. And Jesus himself says so in Matthew chapter 16, verse 26. Jesus is saying, so what? A person had all the possession and achievement in the world. It would be meaningless if he loses his salvation, if he loses his relationship with God. So here, Jesus is contrasting the eternal value of our next life with the temporal value of the material and earthly treasures, which, by the way, it's risky and can be destroyed. So in Matthew chapter 6, verse 19 to 20, we can understand the concepts of risk-adjusted value investing. Jesus is saying, though money is temporary and of temporal value, it can be used to invest in treasures in heaven, which is eternal value. Using something temporary to invest in something eternal. And Jesus explained or give the rationale behind his advice in verse 19. Because Jesus knows that all the material or earthly treasures, they can be destroyed. The Tyrian purple that we talk about luxurious and expensive, they can be destroyed by moth. The precious metal can be stolen by thief, no matter how hard the owners try to hide them. In today's context, we store our treasures in real estate, in bank deposit, in company stocks. But we know fire consumes buildings, there's run on banks, and company stocks can vanish overnight. So Jesus is saying, no material or earthly treasures are safe because there is no security of value as it does not stand the test of time. Yes, some earthly treasures can escape the moth and escape the thief and last a long time, but they can never escape the ultimate fire on Judgment Day, as stated in 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 7. So the point here Jesus is making is that no earthly or material treasures are safe, and amassing material wealth is simply a bad investment choice. See, Jesus is saying, don't do it. And Jesus went on to explain clearly what we could do with the money that we have, which is temporary. He tells us in verse 20 to invest in treasures in heaven. So what exactly are treasures in heaven? They are spiritual and eternal rewards that we may receive in heaven that are gained by aligning our life with the teaching of Jesus on the use of money by investing towards the eternal perspective. A financial advisor will tell you your investment horizon should be at least 5 years or more, 10 years perhaps. On the screen, you see a sample of an endowment policy where parents can buy for a child when he's born. You invest $200,000 when a child is born. In 80 years, that $200,000 will become $1 million. In 100 years, the $200,000 will become $2 million. In the light of verse 20, even 100 years investment horizon seems to be short-sighted. It is as if Jesus is saying, do not ask what the return will be in 100 years, but in 100 million years through eternity. So Jesus is telling us to be a smart investor, to look for returns beyond our investment, beyond our retirement years, beyond this life into our next life. This is not only the right thing to do, but a smart thing to do. And Jesus again here explained the rationale in verse 20. It is because the earthly wealth are temporary, whereas heavenly treasures will last forever. Temporary treasures are pseudo wealth of transient values, and heavenly treasures are true wealth of lasting values. Earthly treasures are risky and can be destroyed. Heavenly treasures has zero risk. Therefore, it can provide the ultimate security for our soul. Clearly, it is not an emotional appeal, but a logical one, as Jesus argued from the bottom line. So Jesus is teaching us to be a smart investor, to use money, which is temporary, to invest in treasures in heaven, which is true wealth and eternal. And that is what risk-adjusted value investing is all about. The third thing we need to do in choosing the right investment advice is to examine ourselves truthfully. Unless we are prepared to examine ourselves and reflect on the true purpose of our life, it is pointless to consider any investment option. In examining ourselves, we ask ourselves three questions. Are our hearts distracted? Are our minds darkened? Or our wills divided? Firstly, are our hearts distracted? Verse 21 says, "For where your treasure is, there your hearts will be also." Paraphrase to mean, where your investment is, there your interest will be. You see, our hearts will always be where the money is. Our treasures will always be where our hearts will always be where the money is. So if you want to know where the heart is, just see where your energy, your time, and your money is being directed. If someone were to audit your bank account and calendar, what would they say that you value most? The second question here is, are our minds darkened? Verse 22 says, the eyes is the lamp of our body. How is the eyes being the lamp of our body? In those days, the Jews believed that the eyes are the source of light, just like the lamp. They also believe good eyes means generous, bad eyes means stingy or envy. So what we see with our eyes will have an effect on whether our mind is in darkness or is in light. So if you only see things we can grab and hoard, and through our eyes come the darkness of greed. If we see things we can do for God's people and give, through our eyes comes the light of generosity. Then our mind and even our body will be full of light. Thirdly, the third question here is, are our wills divided? In those days, you need 30 pieces of silver to buy a slave or to own a slave, and put yourself in the upper bracket of the society. But if you have only 15 pieces of silver, you can ask a friend to come out the other 15 pieces of silver, and both of you can own the slave. But this plan always doesn't work, because over time, the slave will veer to one or the other. The point here is there is only one throne in each life, big enough for either God or money. We cannot be slaves to God and money. So a divided will be the eroding factor to Christian stewardship. So in conclusion, Jesus knew the negative effect that wealth has on the people, and many people had made bad investment choices. And he also knew that the future generation would face the same problem. So in Matthew 6, he's not telling us not to invest, but rather make it a good investment. Put it in the right place. Invest in true treasures that last forever by investing treasures in heaven. So you notice in verse 20, read carefully. But store up for yourself treasures in heaven. You notice the word yourself? You are not storing up treasures for Jesus. You are not storing up treasures for your family, but for yourself, for your next life. And Jesus and Paul gave us an example in Philippians 4:17. It says, "Not that I seek the gift itself, but I seek the profit which increases to your account." Jesus' promise of spiritual rewards for our present stewardship give us believers motivation to follow the examples of the Philippine Christian who give generously to Paul's mission. What did the giving of the Philippine Christian mean to them? Here Paul used commercial and business terms to describe their giving, like fruits, profits, credits, accounts. So Paul is saying that their giving, the Philippines Christian giving, is like a form of investment that bear fruits, earn a profit, and increases into their account that yields spiritual rewards. Paul was also saying that he did not covet their money. He didn't want their money, but he was glad that the Philippines Christian were willing to withdraw their money from their earthly account and deposit into their heavenly account, consisting of God's work of eternal rewards. So Paul knew the teaching of Jesus on the use of money in Matthew 6 and used the same concept in his writing to the Philippines Christian. Jim Elliot was an American missionary, and he died in Ecuador in 1956. He was only 28 years old when he was killed by the tribes, the same tribes whom he tried to evangelize. In his journal, he wrote this: "He is no fool who gives what he cannot keep, to gain what he cannot lose." So when we die, when Jesus comes back again, all the money that we have in our bank and in the super, we cannot take it with us. But while we are alive, we can send it ahead by using the money that is temporarily, that's placed in our hands, to invest in treasures in heaven, true wealth that lasts forever. So in assessing the credentials of the advisor, who do you think is more qualified to give you an investment advice? In considering the advice critically, who do you think has the best plan for our life, for this life, and for the life after this? And in examining our hearts or ourselves, ask ourselves these three questions: are our hearts distracted? Are minds darkened? Are our wills divided? So Jesus is trying to teach us in Matthew 6, in today's text, to be a smart investor, to give money which we cannot keep, to gain treasures in heaven which we cannot lose. And that is how we choose the right investment advice. And if there's anyone among us who have studied the Bible and would like to take this opportunity to become a Christian, or any members who like the prayers of the church, would you come as we stand and sing the song of invitation?